Hello and welcome to JavaScript Marathon Training presented by This.Labs. My name is Sarah Renaud and I will be your host today. We're excited to bring you our next session, TypeScript for Beginners. Today's trainer is Dacey Nolan, software engineer at This.Inc. Welcome, Dacey.
Hi, thank you.
You can find Dacey on Twitter using the handle shown at the bottom of the screen. Please don't hesitate to get in touch if you have any questions or feedback. Of course, JavaScript Marathon would not be possible without our sponsors. Our sponsor today is This.Labs, your partners in modern digital transformation. We specialize in mentorship, consulting, training, and staff augmentation for enterprise organizations. Find out more at this.labs.com or send us an email at hi@this.co. Do you find keeping up with constantly evolving technologies a struggle? Do you want to bring your team up to speed on one of the latest technologies? This.Labs offers personalized training programs to suit your organizational needs, ensuring you and your company stay on the leading edge. Contact us today at hi@this.co to set up your complimentary needs assessment. Check out these upcoming special events. We do have monthly global meetups in Angular, GraphQL, React, and Vue. More details are available at this.co. And finally, we are back next month with JavaScript Marathon. We return on Wednesday, December 5th. Stay tuned for more details. And with that, I will hand it on over to Dacey.
Great, thank you so much. And thank you, This.Dot, for sponsoring the JavaScript Marathon. Again, my name is Dacey Nolan, and I'm a software engineer based in North Carolina. I am actually self-taught. I work with a lot of JavaScript, mainly using React, Vue, and TypeScript. If you do have any questions, please reach out to me on Twitter at Dacey_Nolan. So during this intro to TypeScript, we're going to talk about what TypeScript is, the benefits that it can provide, and how you can use it in your projects. We're not going to talk about how you can configure TypeScript because depending on your stack, configuring TypeScript is going to be a little bit different for everyone. We are going to look at some examples in the TypeScript playground. Now, I'm going to assume that you do not know anything about TypeScript. So if you do have basic JavaScript knowledge, that will suffice. Okay, so what is TypeScript? It is a programming language that was developed and is maintained by Microsoft. It is also a JavaScript superset. So what does that mean? Pretty much it's going to build on JavaScript. It's going to provide your JavaScript more features. It's all going to compile to JavaScript. So by default, JavaScript is not a typed language. So this means that we don't specify variable types. So we can reassign variable to different types, such as a string to a number or a number to an array. Now, some languages, such as Go, will require you to specify those variable types, and they will not allow you to reassign. Now, since JavaScript is defaulted to not be a typed language, we can use TypeScript to provide that static type checking. So why do we want to use TypeScript? So when I was starting in my development journey, I was learning a lot of JavaScript and learning React. And I kept hearing the word TypeScript all over the place. And I looked at it and thought, okay, why do I want to use this? That saying, why fix something that's not broken, popped into my head. So I had code and it was working and I wasn't getting any errors. So why did I want to spend time adding more syntax? I finally decided to give TypeScript a shot and add it to an existing application. And even though I did have to write a little bit more syntax up front, the benefits really does outweigh that time. Okay, so we all have been coding, we have a bug, we don't know where that bug came from, we're so confused by it, and we spend hours debugging to realize that we use the wrong syntax or passing in the wrong parameters. And it's really easy to make errors in JavaScript. And you might not be able to catch these errors until runtime. Using TypeScript can allow you to catch those bugs before runtime. Now, it's not going to make your code bug-free. I really wish it would, but it will help you catch these ahead of time. And we've all been this person right here, learning something new, getting frustrated because we don't understand the concept because there's such a crazy learning curve. Because TypeScript is a JavaScript superset, it's going to build on that existing knowledge of JavaScript. So if you know JavaScript, it's going to have a low learning curve. Many programming refactors will require you to dive headfirst. So you're going to spend a lot of time trying to, do a crazy refactor. TypeScript's actually going to allow you to gradually implement it into your application because you can have both TypeScript files and JavaScript files in your application. So you don't have to worry about tech debt. TypeScript is also going to provide you with another layer of documentation and meaning to your code. Now, this is really great if you're working with a team of developers who might not be familiar with all parts of the code base. So you can see in this first example, I'm actually using React, and I've created a component called status. And I am going to pass a parameter called theme. Now, if I am new to this code base, I might not necessarily know what that theme is, and I'm going to have to go off and search for it. And that's okay, but with TypeScript, you can see on the right, the moment I type theme, I actually see all of the themes that I have access to, and this is called IntelliSense or autocomplete. Another great thing about JavaScript is that it can compile to any JavaScript version, all the way down to ES3. And you can use it with frameworks such as Angular, Vue, and React, and you can use it on the back end with Node.js. TypeScript also has an amazing community. They have hundreds of contributors online, as well as amazing documentation. So it's going to be really easy for you to get started and get support. This graph I got from npmtrends.com, and it shows the amount of downloads that TypeScript has had in its lifetime. So in the year 2016, you can see there's not many downloads. But if we look in the month of October of 2020, we can see that it's almost at 15 million downloads. So TypeScript is becoming more and more popular and widely used. So if you're familiar with TypeScript and you're applying for a next role, it could give you a competitive edge when applying. Okay, so TypeScript provides you with so many types, and they're also going to give you the ability to make custom types. Don't worry, we're not going to go over all of these types because it can get very overwhelming. I will introduce you to some of those core types, and then if we have time, we'll look at some more advanced types. So TypeScript supports the same types that you would expect in JavaScript, so those primitive types. We're going to look at them very quickly, and then we'll go in and dive in deep with some more examples. So the first core type in TypeScript is a string. And if you remember in JavaScript, a string is a text value that has single quotes, double quotes, or backticks. There's also a type number. And number can be a float, an integer. It doesn't matter what kind of number, binary. It's all going to be typed as a number. Now, some programming languages will make you specify what type of number. So if it is an integer, you might have to specify that. But TypeScript, you don't. When you type a value as a number, you don't have to specify what type of number. Also, the next type is Boolean. So Booleans are going to be true, false. In some programming languages, a Boolean can be represented with a truthy or falsy value. That's not the case with TypeScript. If you want to type something as a Boolean, it could only be true or false. The next type that we have is an object. So objects are going to be that key value pair wrapped in the curly braces. We also have a type for arrays, and arrays are going to be in these square brackets. Another core type is called a tuple. So tuples are found in other programming languages such as Python. I don't believe that they're common in JavaScript, but a tuple is an array with a fixed length and a fixed type. Again, we are going to go over these in more detail, so don't worry if you don't have experience with tuples. And the last core type that we're going to look at is the type called any. Now, before we can look at some examples, we need to talk about how we can declare types. So there's two basic ways that we declare types in TypeScript, and that's implicitly and explicitly. So the formal definition for implicit is implied, though not plainly expressed. So TypeScript can actually implicitly type for us, meaning that TypeScript is going to infer what type it thinks we want. So we can look at this example at the bottom, and I'm not telling TypeScript the type, but actually behind the scenes, it thinks that this type is a string. And this could lead to bugs. The other way that we can declare types is explicitly. So the formal definition for explicit is stated clearly and in detail, leaving no room for confusion or doubt. So if we explicitly declare a type, we are telling TypeScript exactly what we want that type to be. So you can see in this example, I have a variable and I'm telling TypeScript that I want it to be a string. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at some examples. Now, if you want to follow along, we're going to be working in the TypeScript playground. And you can find that at typescriptlang.org/play, or you can just go to the TypeScript documentation and click on Playground. I've zoomed in my screen, so you can't see Playground right here, but it should be, I think, right behind Tools. So if you've never worked in the TypeScript playground, it could look like it's working magically. What I like about the playground is we don't have to worry about configuring to play around. This is a safe space where nothing really can break, but we can look at what types that our variables have. Real quick, if you wanted to add extra configuration, you can do that here. We can also see some JavaScript examples or TypeScript examples. And we have a error log and console log. So this is not going to hot reload, meaning I can't just save this and see my changes. I have to click run. The moment I click run, you can see that in my console, it updates. Okay. So the first example we're going to look at is the string type, and we're going to use that explicit typing. So if I want to create a variable, let's see, I'm going to say variable color, and I want to tell TypeScript that only let me assign color to a string. And to do that, we're going to add a colon right behind that variable name and whatever type that we want. In this case, I want a string. Sorry if I could spell. Okay, so this is an example of me explicitly telling TypeScript what type I want. So now I can assign color a value. So if I put blue, TypeScript's happy, we don't get an error. But what happens if I want to tell TypeScript that my color is the number 3? You can see the moment I do this, we get this red squiggly line, and this is telling me that there's an error. If I put my cursor over that error, you can see that we see exactly what color is typed as, so a string, but we can see the error, and it says type number is not assignable to type string. So pretty much TypeScript is telling me, well, you said color can only accept strings, but you're trying to give me a number, so something's not right. So maybe that was an accident for me, and I'm like, you know what? I actually meant this to be a string. Now it's happy. Okay, so let's look at how we can implicitly assign this type string to a variable. So we're going to say, we're going to create a variable called animal, and we're going to immediately set it to a value. So I'm going to say dog. Now, if I use my cursor to kind of go over animal, we can see that animal has a type string. So it says let animal colon string. Now, I didn't tell TypeScript that I wanted my animal variable to only allow strings. So this is an implicit example. So because dog is a string, because that value is a string, TypeScript's thinking that I only want to assign animal to strings. So if I try to assign animal to false, animal shows an error, and it's telling me it's because the type of Boolean is not assigned to a string. But if I change this to a string, cat, it's happy. Okay, so that was TypeScript, able to see TypeScript working. Let's look at an example for numbers. So let's first declare a type explicitly. So I'm going to say create a variable called age, and I only want age to be a number. So remember, we add the colon right behind that variable, a space, and then we're going to put the type. So in this case, I want age to be a number. If I move my cursor over age, you can see that I see that age is that number. And this is a great way to debug, because maybe you're working on a project and you don't know what the type is. If you have TypeScript configured and in your application, you can see what type it actually has. So now if I try to set age to 28, it's happy. I don't see an error. But if I try to set age to something other than a number, we're actually going to see an error. I love how TypeScript does this, because I've actually had an instance where I had a form and I wanted the user to send me a number. Now, I left out some code in my form and I kept getting back a string instead of a number. And I like that TypeScript tells me, hey, you told me that this was supposed to be a number, but you passed me a string. What am I supposed to do with this? So then I'm like, oh, that was an error on my part. I'm sorry. So let's look at how we can implicitly type a number. So we're going to create a variable. We're going to say pages. Now we're going to immediately assign it a value. Now, again, we're not telling TypeScript that we want pages to be a number, but because we set it to a number, if we highlight over pages, we can see that pages is a type of number. So TypeScript is inferring that type. And now I can reassign pages to another number, so say 12. But if I try to set pages to a string, we're going to get an error that type string is not assignable to type number. Okay, so let's look at the next core type, which are Booleans. So Booleans are true, false values. We're not going to look at how to implicitly and explicitly assign these types from now on. I'm going to just mix it up. So let's create a variable called isBeginner. And I'm going to immediately assign it to true. So this is implicitly setting the isBeginner type to a Boolean. So now I could say isBeginner false, and this passes. But remember, I said earlier that we can only type something as a Boolean if it's true or false. Truthies and falsy values will not pass. So if I try to set isBeginner to the number 0, which is a falsy value, we will get an error that says the number, type number, is not assignable to type Boolean. Okay, so let's look at this next type. This type is an array. Now, arrays are going to be a little bit differently when we type them. So let's go ahead and create a variable called animals. We already did animals. Okay, let's do food, because I love food. And now we're going to assign food as it's an array with apple, and we're going to say pizza. Okay. Now, I can't type this just as an array. TypeScript actually wants you to be more specific. So what that means is it wants to know these elements in the array. It wants to know these types. Now, there's two ways that we can declare these types for an array. This is the first way, the first example. So here I'm telling TypeScript that I want a string array, or you can say I want an array of strings. So because food is an array and each element is a string, so pizza is a string and apple is a string, I'm telling TypeScript that the next time I declare food or try to reassign food, I want each one of those elements in that array to also be a string. So I could say food is fries. Oh, not fryers, fries. Or I can say banana. And this is fine because we have an array of strings. But if I try to say food is numbers, we're going to get an error. And you see that it's not showing an error right under the variable name. It's actually showing an error under these two elements. And we see type number is not assignable to type string for both of these. Now, if I turn these into a string, both of these errors are going to go away. Now, I did say that there is a second way that we can declare an array type with TypeScript. So let me see, let's do an array of lucky numbers. And I'm going to say that lucky numbers are 33 and 7. Now, the second way that we can type this is by adding our colon and putting a capital A array, adding carets, and inside the carets are going to be the type of these elements in our array. So in this case, lucky number is an array of numbers. So I'm saying that I want an array of numbers, or a number array. So this is not a very common syntax. Actually, if we highlight or move our cursor over lucky number, we can see that TypeScript actually kind of rewrites that type for us and says lucky numbers is number array. Now, if I try to reassign my lucky numbers to an array with strings, we're going to get an error that shows that string is not assignable to type number. Okay. The next core type that we're going to look at are tuples. So a tuple is an array with a fixed length and fixed types. So if I am going, let's say I'm going to declare a variable called person. And I want person to be an array where the first element is a string, so the person's name, and I might want the second element to be a number. So in this case, my age. Now, I want to tell TypeScript that anytime I try to reassign person, I always want it to be an array with two elements where the first is a string and the second is a number. So we're going to go right behind where we declared that variable person, add our colon. Now we're going to put the square braces to show that this is an array. And then we're going to add our type. Now, whatever type we want as this first element, or whatever is at index 0, that's what type we're going to write first. So in this case, I want my person to have an array where the first element is a string. And then I want my second element to be a number, because whatever is at my index of 1, or my second element, is a number. So in this case, I'm going to say it's a number. Now, order matters when you're working with a tuple. So if I try to reassign person to an array and have the number 28 and the first element and the second element a string Dacey, we get an error. And if we look at the error, we see type number is not assignable to type string, And then in this case, type string is not assignable to type number. So this is showing us that order does matter. Yes, I have a number in a string, but it's actually looking at what is in the first, what's the first element and what's the second element. Also, I said that links matter when working with tuples. So I can reassign person and have Dacey be the string, 28 the number, and let's add a Boolean false. So now person is showing that I have an error. So let's look at it. It says type string number Boolean is not assignable to type string number. The source has 3 elements, but target only allows 2. So basically it's saying that our type that we declared up here only has 2 elements. But here, when we are reassigning person to name Dacey, or sorry, person Dacey 28 false, we're actually giving it 3 elements. And so it's just yelling at us. Okay, so those were tuples. Let's go ahead and look at the final, or I'm sorry, not the final, another core type. This type is called any. So what happens if you do not care what type your data is? You might want to use the any type. So I can create a variable called my value. And I'm going to automatically set it to, let's say, a string. Oh, goodness. Sorry, guys, I can't type today. Okay, so then I might want to say that my variable is a number 3. Well, we get an error, right? Because TypeScript is implicitly typing my value as a string since we initially set it to a string. If I highlight over this my value, we get type number is not assignable to type string. But again, what if I don't care? What if it could be a string, a number, an array? I don't care what my value is. We can use the any type. So we can go right behind my value, add that colon, space, and type any. Now, the moment I do that, where I try to reassign my value to the number 3 is not yelling at me anymore. So now I can assign my value to an array of numbers, and it's not going to matter. So, but what if you only want to pick and choose types? So maybe any is not the best type to use. You want to specify maybe 2 types. You can actually tell TypeScript that you want your variable to have multiple types. So I'm going to create a variable. Let's see, amount. And I want amount to either be a string or a number. So to do that in TypeScript, I'm going to add the colon right behind amount. And I'm going to write the 2 types that amount is able to take. So in this case, I want to say a string or a number. So this symbol is called a pipe. And on my keyboard, it's on the far right side, right behind delete. But this in TypeScript means or. So this is going to read, let amount have the type of string or a number. So if I try to assign amount to the number 33, I'm able to do that. Same as if I want amount to be a string of 1, I can do that. But if I try to reassign amount to an array of numbers, we can see that we get an error under each one of these elements. Actually, yeah. So that type number is not assigned to type string. So it's, it's not letting us because we have string and number. Okay. So the last core type that we are going to talk about are objects. So let's go ahead and create a variable called let's see, movie. Oh my goodness, I am so sorry. I have been like this all day, just not being able to type. Okay, so I declared a variable called movie, and I want to assign it an object. So let's say that movie is going to be an object where I have a title. We're going to say Star Wars. I'm a big Star Wars fan. And maybe we want the episode. So I actually am a huge fan of episode 3. So I'm going to put episode 3. So what we could do is actually type this as the word object. Just be very cautious when you are writing your types. In this case, object is going to be a lowercase. I think a lot of the core types are lowercase. Some types are uppercase, so just be cautious. So now if I try to reassign movie to a string of Star Wars, we see that we get an error because type string is not assignable to type object. I personally do not like typing my objects as an object because I can actually go here and say my movie is name Dacey, age 28, and this passes. And depending on how I'm going to use my movie, I might want to show the movie title by accessing movie.title. And this could lead to a bug because my movie doesn't have a title. So there's, I think, a better way to type objects. And so that second way is this. So let's declare we're going to say a book. We're going to say book is going to equal title. Let's say, okay, my book. I'm going to be boring you guys. I'm sorry. I am reading a book right now, but I don't know what the author is. So let's say that I'm the author. Okay. So if I want to type my object a better way, what I can do is kind of lay out a blueprint for this object. So I'll add my colon and then have my curly braces and say that I want my object to have a title. And I want that title only to be a string. And then, I want it to have an author. And I want the author only to be a string. So if I try to reassign book to just a string, we get an error, right? Because it's going to say type string does not exist on type title string, author string. But the cool thing is if I try to assign book to title of Star Wars, and we're going to do episode 3, we get an error right under episode 3. Now this one's weird because we did have a title, but we see this error says type title string episode number is not assignable to type title string author string. Object literal may only specify known properties, and episode does not exist in type title string author string. Okay, so I know that's a lot of words. So basically what this is doing is this type that we have where we are saying type is a string and author is a string, that's acting like a blueprint. So TypeScript is looking at where we reassigned book to this title Star Wars episode 3. What it's doing is it says, okay, my type is supposed to have a title. Does this book have a title? It does. Okay, check. Let's go to the next thing. Is that title a string? It is. Star Wars isn't a string. Check. Let's go to the next thing. Does book have an author? In this case, no, it doesn't. So it's going to fail. So again, I love the second way just because it could potentially help you catch bugs in the long run by accidentally passing in, the wrong object, and that way you don't spend hours debugging why you can't access your author. Okay, so those were all the core types. Now let's look at a real world example. So here I have a function. Sorry, grab some water. Okay, here I have a function called create user. And I'm going to pass it name, age, and is admin. And then I want to return an object with my name, age, and is admin. Now you can see that I already have errors on this page. If we look at it, we see parameter name implicitly has an any type. So just like we type those variables, we can actually type parameters. So again, we're already getting an error that says that these all have an implicit any type. But luckily, products come to us and said, I want name to be a string and I want it required. Next, I want age to be a number and I want it to be required. And we want admin to be a Boolean, but that should be optional. So just like we typed those variables, to type a parameter, you're going to go right behind that parameter, add the colon, and then your type. So product said that name is going to be a string. And then they said age is going to be the number. And it is admin is going to be a Boolean. So we can actually hover over our function and we can see where function has the name string, age number is admin Boolean. And then you can see it here in that return, that name is string, age is number, is admin is Boolean. But one thing is all of these parameters are required. And products already told us that is admin should be optional. So to make this optional in TypeScript, we're going to add a question mark right in front of the colon. So now if I hover over my function, we can see that name is string and age is number, but our is admin looks a little differently. So now it says Boolean or undefined. So remember, this pipe in the middle means or. So it's saying that it can take a Boolean or it could be undefined because the user does not have to, because we don't have to specify if someone's an admin or not because we did make it optional. Okay, so let's go ahead and create some users. So I'm going to call my function and I need to pass it with some arguments. Now, another really awesome reason why I love TypeScript is, do you see the moment that I put these parentheses behind my function call? We can see this little pop-up show up. And it's telling us that create user needs to have a name string, age number, and is admin either Boolean or undefined. And actually name is bolded and underlined. So this is telling me that my first argument should be a string. So I'm going to write Dacey here. The moment I put my comma, age is now bolded and underlined. So I know my next argument is going to be an age. And then a comma again, and I can see that is admin is now bolded and underlined. This is optional. So, but in this case, I'm going to be an admin, so I'm going to put true. So let's create a second user. And we're going to say create user is, we're going to say Tom, 28. And he's not an admin, so we're going to just leave that out because, again, we told TypeScript that it's optional. Just to show you if this was not optional, so I'm going to erase that question mark, we get that red squiggly line showing that there's an error. If we look at it, it says an argument for is admin was not provided because these were all required. So I'm actually going to make this optional again, and my little error is gone. Okay, So I want to show you too now, if I run my code, let's go ahead and try to console log our users to see what they look like. And then user 2. Okay, again, with the playground, it's not going to automatically show those logs. I have to click run. The moment I do that, we see this is our user 1. We have a name, Dacey, age 28, is admin true. And then our user 2 has a name, Tom, age of 28. Because we did not give it is admin, we're not going to see it there. Okay, so now I want to create a greeting and tell my users goodbye. So I'm going to create a function that is say hello. And I want to pass in that user, and that way I have access to the name. Again, we can type these parameters. The thing is in this case, I would probably have to say, okay, say that my name's a string, my age is a number, and that's just going to get so tiring. I mean, we're going to have 2 functions, and if I have to repeat myself, it's going to get very annoying. TypeScript has an advanced type called an interface. Now, an interface is going to be reusable. It's not going to be an inline type. We're going to make that somewhere else and then be able to reuse it in our code. So to define an interface, we first write out the word interface, space, and then we get to name our interface. A rule of thumb is you want it to be Pascal case and try to think of something semantic. So I could call this foo, but if I leave my code, don't look at this for a while and come back, I might not know what I meant when I was using foo. Since this interface is going to hold all of my typed information for a user, I'm going to call this user. Again, I'm going to capitalize user. So if we highlight over user 1, we can see that we have name is string, age number is admin, Boolean or undefined because it's optional. I can use all of the same information in this interface. So I'm going to put name is a string, age is a number, and is admin is going to be a Boolean. Now remember that we actually said that this is an optional, so don't forget your question mark. So now I have this user type that I have created that I can use in my code without having to type over that same stuff. So just like we can type our parameters, we can actually type our return statement in TypeScript. By doing that, right behind your parentheses, we're going to add a colon space. And here, I want my return to have the same blueprint as my interface. So I'm actually going to write user. So this user is this. Now, if I highlight over user 1, we can see that our type has changed. Before, it was showing name string, age number is admin, Boolean or undefined. Now it's showing that our type is user. So now if I want to make a function called say hi, and I want to pass it a user, I can now just say that I want user to have the same blueprint as this user. So I'm going to do that. And I'm going to return hello with my user.name. So this is that IntelliSense or autocomplete at work. So the moment I add the dot behind user, we can see what all we have access to. Now, if we didn't have TypeScript and I was working on this, I might accidentally say user.first, which does not exist. Actually, TypeScript will throw an error and tell us that property first does not exist on type user because there's no first here. But because TypeScript is giving us that autocomplete, there's no question of which property I want to use. So I want to say name. And now I can call my function say hi with user1. And just to show you this works, let's go ahead and we'll console log this. Okay, let's go here. There's our log. Let's run it. And we see, hello, Dacey. Okay, so now we're going to create a second function. And it's going to tell our user goodbye. And we're going to pass it in a user. And again, it's going to have that blueprint of user. We're going to then return hi with our user. And we get that IntelliSense again that's telling us name. So again, what TypeScript is doing is, we created this user. Remember, our user was the shape. Name, Dacey, age 28, is admin true. And this interface is that blueprint. So it's going to go line by line and say, okay, does the user that was passed in, does it have a name? It did. Yes, it does. Was that name a string? Yes, it was. Okay, it's going to go to the next one. Does it have an age? Yep. Is that age a number? It is. And does it have an admin? If it's no, it's going to stop there. If we say yes, then it's going to say, okay, is that admin a Boolean? And it is. So this was just a taste of what TypeScript can do and some of the features that it can provide. Again, I love the interfaces because you can reuse it. Actually, what's really cool is, you saw if we had to type out that type for every parameter of a function, we would probably go mad. But what would happen if a product actually says, oh, wait, we want to add one more option. Let's see if they're a new user or not. We would have to change that in many, many places. Whereas the interface, we can change it there. We might have to change it to a few spots. So where create user, we'd probably have to add, that parameter there. But we wouldn't have to change it in, 20 different functions. Okay, so that was a lot. So just to recap, we talked about what TypeScript is, how we can use TypeScript, and what benefits it provides. So we got to look at some of those core types, learned about the difference between explicit versus implicit types, and we even got to look at an advanced type called interfaces. Are there any questions?
Awesome, Dacey. That was a wonderful presentation. So we are opening it up for questions. So if anyone has any questions, go ahead and drop them in. We do have a couple comments, though, that TypeScript is awesome. And we do agree with that, Sergio. Thank you for that. And also, Kundan, sorry if I'm not pronouncing your name correctly. He has also said, Dacey, thank you so much for doing this. Really liking the pace so far. So,
oh, great. Thank you. I was trying to look at the time, and I am a nervous speaker, so I tend to speak fast. So I was worried that I was probably talking a little bit too fast, but I'm glad that the pace was good so far.
Yes, absolutely. So we'll wait just for a couple more, see if anyone has any questions here.
And if y'all, if you're not watching live and you do have questions, please reach out to me on Twitter. My handle is right at the bottom of this question slide. So that is Dacey_Nolan.
I'm going to drop that in the chat right now, just so people have it. So we do have a question that came in. How would you handle typing nested data structures?
Oh, goodness. So that is a little bit more advanced for me. So I'm still kind of technically a beginner with TypeScript. I really wanted to do this course because TypeScript was just so fun for me. I haven't gotten into the nested properties. I know you're able to use like nested arrays and nested objects, but as far as typing, you can use those interfaces, because to type those, but I don't have experience with that so far, but that's going to be my next thing.
Yeah, and if anyone in the chat wants to answer Michael's question, please feel free. We do have another one that's coming in. How does TypeScript work with a React application? And do you recommend using TypeScript with React applications?
Yeah, so actually I was learning TypeScript with React first. Because so if you're familiar with React, you can have those reusable components. And while I was learning React, I decided to learn TypeScript, and it really helped me better get I have a better understanding of the flow of my application, as well as I was making better design decisions, which sounds crazy because I wrote this application, right, and I had that status that I showed in that example. And when you're passing in props, sometimes you can forget what props and you have to go back to that component. And so TypeScript really helped me pay more attention. And yeah, so I highly recommend it with React. Hopefully that answered your question.
So Sergio has a question here. Is there an easy way to configure TypeScript on VS Code with React's TSX files?
So let me go back and look at their documentation. So their documentation is amazing. So I highly recommend you taking a look there. Let's see. Actually, am I still sharing my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So let's go look at their documentation. Okay. And if we can click download. So they do have TypeScript, adding TypeScript into your project. Having TypeScript set up on a per project basis. So it does show that there's some instructions with VS Code, or you can install with NPM.
Awesome. Great question. All right, we have another one from Brian. Do JavaScript classes become types? For example, would a JS date object have a particular type without having to declare it as a type?
I'm not sure I'm understanding the question. I'm sorry. If somebody else is more familiar with the classes, that would help.
Yes, absolutely. If anyone has any insight for Brian, go ahead and drop it in the chat as well. And I think that is it for questions. If we have any more that come in, again, reach out to Dacey on Twitter. I dropped that in the chat so you can get a hold of her at her handle. And thank you so much for everyone attending. This was an awesome session, Dacey. We really appreciate you taking the time to teach us all TypeScript. We will be back with Kevin Wolf and a little bit of GraphQL, so stay tuned. We'll be back in about 38 minutes. So grab a snack, come back, and we'll see y'all soon.
Bye.